My name is Barry Kirk, and I am the Executive Director of CAVCO, which used to be called the Canadian Automated Vehicles Centre of Excellence. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the third installment of our CAV Canada virtual series, hosted by Invest Ottawa and the Canada North Business Association in partnership with Area X.O and CAVCO. As with many things in 2020, our team has been hard at work to shift the 5th annual Connected and Autonomous Vehicle Conference to this virtual format. And we are thrilled to have so many of you with us for this three-part series. I want to give a special thanks to all our team behind the scenes, Patrick, Adam, and Jess, for their dedication to make this event happen, and to the team at Venue Live for the help in facilitating a productive and impactful conference experience. The health and safety of our participants and community remains our top priority. We thank everyone for following the important guidelines and protocols established by our health authorities. In support of these goals and to proactively fight this pandemic, we are excited to present this digital event series and postpone our traditional in-person conference until 2021, when it will be safe for us to come back together here in Ottawa. We invite you to share CAV Canada broadly on social media by using the hashtag CAV Canada and handle CAV Canada. Together with our partners, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who have taken the time to join us online today. Before we jump into the panels, I want to mention a couple of big picture items in the CAV ecosystem. First, the CAV era has already started, albeit gradually with limited capability and deployment. The evidence for this includes the recent launch of truly driverless robo-taxis in Phoenix and China without the use of safety drivers. In addition, there are autonomous vehicles in commercial use today in agriculture and mining. I forecast that the CAV population and capabilities will increase through the 2020s and into the 2030s. The second big picture item is that Canada is very well positioned to excel in the global CAV ecosystem. We have many excellent companies that are developing the hardware and software, engaged in testing, and involved in the supply chains for both passenger and non-passenger CAVs. All levels of government are actively engaged in examining the policy and regulatory issues involved in CAV deployment. Canada's universities are also very active in many different ways. One example is that a recent call for participation for a student automated snowplow competition attracted interest from 11 universities, from Simon Fraser in BC to Memorial University in Newfoundland and Labrador. I would also like to welcome all of you to 1908. Yes, you heard that right, 1908. At least it feels that way. 1908 saw the first Model T Fords roll off the production line. Clearly, Henry Ford was a brilliant engineer, inventor, and entrepreneur. But I suspect that even he did not foresee the huge impact of the early cars on people's lives and communities in the 20th century. Today, 112 years later, we can forecast a similar magnitude of changes to people's lives and our communities. And that is exactly what we will explore today. We have two panels lined up for you. The first panel explores some of the impacts that CAVs will have on people's lives, and more on that in a minute. The second panel explores how CAVs will transform our communities. We are very pleased that CBC technology news journalist Manjula Selvarajah will moderate this panel. We are also pleased that the panelists will be Michael Tremblay, Natalie Guthrie, Dr. Brett Tantaxi, and Catherine Carlton. And Angela will be introducing these people more fully a bit later on. We are also looking forward to an interactive Q&A session at the end of each panel session. And please use the box with a question mark on your screen to share your questions with us, and we will address as many as we can. You will also have an opportunity to continue your discussion with fellow participants during an online networking session at the conclusion of our program. So please be certain to stay and to seize the opportunity. I would now like to move to our first panel, which, as I mentioned earlier, addresses the impact of CAVs on people's lives. I am moderating this panel, and we will hear from all the panelists and then have a Q&A session. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce our panelists. Amin Yalnizyan, who is an Atkinson Fellow on the Future of Workers. I first met Amin when we both served on the federal government's working group on the vehicles of the future. I know from those meetings that she is very qualified to speak on the subject of the future of work. Next, Chris Keefe is the Vice President of Autonomous Programs for Aurrigo North America. I will let Chris describe what Aurrigo does, but I will say that I've been following the company for several years and visited them in Coventry, England in 2019. And I've been very impressed by all the innovation at Aurrigo and their success globally. And our third panelist is Cindy Zhang, who is a financial services lawyer at Borden, Ladner, Gervais. BLG is very active in multiple aspects of the CAV ecosystem, and I've met several of her colleagues. I'm pleased that Cindy, who is a lawyer with expertise in financial technology, or fintech, will be speaking today. So, Amin, over to you for your presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Barry. Jessica, could you please pull the presentation up and confirm that you can hear me okay? Can somebody just let me know? We've been having technical problems. Can somebody just let me know if I can be heard?
I can hear you, Amin.
Great. So can people see the slides so far, at least the opening slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I've been asked to speak about the labor impacts of CAVs because I am the Atkinson Fellow on the Future of Workers and have been looking at the impact of technologies on all sorts of economic flows now for about 4 or 5 years. And I want to start with the overview slide, please, Jess. I want to start with perhaps a little bit of a chastener or a chaser to Barry's shot that our world is about to change, and to just remind ourselves that sometimes our imaginations and plans outpace reality. And a question I have had throughout this is, how far will CAV technology go? And I hope to make the case that maybe not as far or as deep or as fast as we think. The second point I would really like to make clear is that while technology plays a role in the future of work and workers, so does demographic realities, and that technology sometimes is about complementing rather than substituting for labor. And the third thing that I want to present is CAVs come in many different forms: automated vehicles, drones, and flying cars, right? Flying cars are our favorite image. And they can replace humans, or humans can become the drones. In our hands and our choice, how we design, regulate, advance, and adopt technologies. Next slide, please. I would like to present you to an idea that we have all had, the idea that the future is going to deliver flying cars. And here's the reality is, in 2020, we have technologies that don't always work out the way they planned and are far less elegant than we had planned. Next slide, please. So really, I want to talk about how far CAV technology can go. And the top picture is from 2018. It's a Volvo car where it was assumed that CAV can literally let you go to sleep. You can travel long distances without touching the wheel. And the greater likelihood is that it will not do all the driving for you, especially on public thoroughfares, but it will do more and more of the hard thinking and looking around the corner for you, quite literally. And what limits mass adoption, especially in public spaces, is the cost and the needs of infrastructure. The key part of automated and connected vehicles, I would say, would be LiDAR functionality, the ability to literally sense and see where the dangers by weather conditions that are very common in Canada, like snow, rain, and in other jurisdictions, dust. And finally, the safety considerations of integrating both human-driven vehicles with automated vehicles and connected vehicles. But for the foreseeable future, I think we can see more automated elements of it. So really what we're talking about is not substitution of human drivers, but the extension of their capabilities and easing their experience. So more of a complementarity than a substitution. Next slide, please. Oh, what did I do? Oh, yes. Sorry, I'm trying to follow along. I'm having some difficulty with this particular platform. So the question about how far CAV technology can go is related to the fact that just a few days ago, 2 days ago, I think, Uber pulled out of its world-leading development of self-driving cars. The big event was in Tempe, Arizona in 2018, in March 2018, when a self-driving vehicle killed a woman. And ever since then, they've had problems with that. But in fact, on December the 7th, it was announced that Uber is pulling out of developing its own self-driving car. It was without question the leader globally on advancing, at least in English, in Western/English speaking markets. It was the unquestionable leader in advancing the adoption at scale of self-driving cars and testing it to integrate it. And it continues to do so, not directly, but through an investment in another company in which it holds 26%. The same day it pulled out of a self-driving vehicle development, which, as I said, is like 2 days ago. It also pulled out of its promise to deliver flying taxis. And we'll get back to flying cars in a minute. But while Uber has pulled out, there are other advances through Google and through Waymo. That doesn't mean that it's ending. It just means that the pace of adoption is probably slowed down. Where it's doubling down is in China, as Barry said, where there are 10 jurisdictions that are geofenced, some of which are fully integrated with drivers. And they will probably lead the charge because the way these vehicles work is the more they work, the more they learn, and the machine learning actually helps them get better at being good drivers in a public space. So the chances are very good that China will lead both the development, the adoption, and consequently the market share for self-driving taxis and vehicles. So as Barry also mentioned, where we are likely to also see far more rapid adoption of automated vehicles that don't require drivers is in private domains, in mining and agriculture and manufacturing and warehousing. And there it's the biggest players that are adopting it the first. So Walmart was seen to be the first in 2019. Now it's Amazon that is absolutely leading the pack. And we're likely to see more of that. So that's where, in fact, there is some concern, some legitimate concern about labor impact. Next slide, please. We've been talking mostly about moving people around, but now I want us to understand that we're talking about also moving things around, and that's perhaps of bigger importance now, particularly during a pandemic that needs that touchless environment. And drones have become the next big thing. In fact, just since November the 12th, we have had 3 deals signed in Canada, possibly because they will be expected to do more delivery in rural and remote for the vaccines. I don't know what has accelerated it, but we've seen 3 deals signed, one with drone delivery air with Air Canada for delivering shipments to the North Shore in Quebec, another in BC, and another that is operating in the western part of Ontario. Um, there's been lots of analysis about how much drones can take over in urban delivery. And the answer is in heavily concentrated jurisdictions like Berlin, like London, like New York, like Toronto. Very little can be done. There's an estimate done of the volume of traffic in 2018, 2019, the density of space and where drones can land and how much airspace they take up. It was estimated that less than 5%, 3.6% in Berlin could be conducted, urban parcels could be conducted by drone. And of course, we're not finished with bespoke transit. Next slide, please. Because one of the things that people also want is not to rely on mass transit. So thus far, the conversation has been mass fleets to move people around. But flying taxis are flying cars. Flying taxis are making a comeback. So Surefly, which is the top picture, costs $200,000 a pop. It's mostly automated and it carries one person at a time. Daymac is a company based out of Toronto. It just announced on December the 2nd its fleet of EVs, which include e-bikes, utes, and e-vehicles. And on the very far left of this very dark, gloomy kind of dystopic picture is a flying car, the first ever Canadian-made flying car. So yeah, super cool, but super expensive. So it's not for the masses for sure. And in fact, the way it's designed, because of the autonomous nature of these vehicles, they're designed without the need for formal licensing. And boy, where have we seen this trope before? It's the whole techno-libertarian trend that is out there that really is going to challenge regulations on how we govern our airspace, how we govern safety. These are difficult considerations going down the line. Next slide, please. So, every time we talk about technology eating all of the jobs, thus far, we have gone through the debate, and then on the other side of it had even more jobs than we had before. This time may be different, but here's what's at stake. First of all, one of the background trends to all of this technological development is population aging. And in the field of trucking, we've already got a third of the workforce over the age of 55. We've already got endemic labor and skill shortages. It's estimated we will be short 25,000 drivers in just 3 years. And there has been a huge increase in job vacancies in the sector since 2019. And this is not even including the pandemic response. And it is estimated that we're literally leaving money on the table because there's not enough people to fill the jobs. The people that are mostly filling the jobs now are not Canadians, but temporary foreign workers, migrant workers, because we can't get Canadians to apply because they think the jobs are going to be eaten by self-driving trucks. Plus, it costs about $8,000 to train. And even though the wages aren't bad, $24 an hour on average, a lot of these people don't have $8,000 to spend on the training. So on the other side is the labor surplus story. And that is our default narrative when it comes to CAVs. The robots eat all of the jobs. How many jobs are we talking about? Over 650,000 jobs in the trucking and logistics sector. That's 3.6% of all jobs, mostly men, mostly not highly educated men. Even though there's a lot of underemployment amongst highly educated men, in particularly the courier service. And here's the numbers: 300,000 truckers currently, 70,000 couriers. Not just the drivers are involved. The shipping and receiving involves 90,000 people, 38,000 people doing the material handling in warehouses where also automated vehicles are taking over. And the rest of the number for that 650 is accountants and managers who can be relocated. So we do have an issue of whether we're dealing with surpluses or shortages, and the solution is not the same for either situation or either scenario. So it's very difficult to design public policy right now. It does depend on the next slide, which is what is driving development and uptake is the scale and pace of adoption. And that depends on who's developing the technology. And that depends on what market segments they are being adopted into. which has got both an industrial and a geographic dimension. The big issue here is how much is mass versus how much is individual use. How much are we talking about private use and public use? And then the third thing is how much of human-driven traffic can drones and CAVs replace? And if not much, then we have a labor shortage issue. If a lot, we potentially have a labor surplus issue. As I said, very different policy problems requiring very different policy solutions. On the right-hand side, I'm talking about the limits here. The infrastructure that is required for automated vehicles is costly, and it has technological and physical limits. And the safety issues are not for the faint of heart if you're a politician or anybody that is in charge of designing the public spaces of the future. Which brings me to what are the regulations for governing this space, literally airspace, but also whether we've got a driver where we have to have a kill switch, whether we've got a driver on board, how do we do all of these things? And who is that technology designed for with are really important questions. We're seeing it with the unions in the auto sector that they don't design the technology, but they design the implementation. That makes a huge difference just there. But the question becomes, do humans become the drones for the machines, which is the case in much manufacturing. So it's not just the quantity of jobs we're talking about, saving or losing, it's also their quality. And with that, I will go to our last slide, which is a big thanks for being invited to this remarkable session.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, a very interesting presentation, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in the future about how far can CAV technology go. I see some differences, and it should be an interesting discussion. And some of the things you say also segue very nicely into what Chris is going to talk about from Aurrigo. So thank you, Armin, and over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Barry. You hear me all right?
Loud and clear, yeah.
All right. So we'll jump right into Aurrigo and what we do and how we affect real lives, I guess is the point here with my presentation. And so we'll jump into the slide here. Let me load this up. So this just kind of gives you an idea of what we do on the first and last mile side. You can see on the slide we have a smaller vehicle on the right. It's our Pod Zero 4-person shuttle. In the middle we have our newest shuttle, which is carries 12 people, and then on the left we have what they call a dolly or a ULD carrier for aviation side. So that's kind of what I'll be describing through this, and this is it will jump into how that affects real world people and deployments. So the first one that I want to talk about is we were at the Blind Veterans in Brighton in the UK, and what this was the first time we conducted an extended trial with veterans or people with a disability. And this was to provide a long-term solution to improve the independence of people that have mobility issues. And for veterans, that can be losing sight, losing limbs, things that allow them to get back and move around at their will. So this deployment in Brighton, we use to transport people around the facility and to bus stops and such, so that they could resume their lives at their discretion when they wanted to go. And so the AV technology in first and last mile will allow people in this specific sector, if we get real specific about it, allow them the independence that they don't have to depend on calling an aunt or an uncle or the staff or stick to times that these facilities offer within a certain time slot. This will allow them to go when they choose, and so that is very important to people that have experienced mobility issues or loss. So that's in Brighton in the UK, and the next one, kind of playing off the same thing, but we have Retirement Village in Elliott Gardens in Adelaide, Australia, and kind of the same thing where people have lost mobility to a certain extent in these communities that that they live in. Now they can freely move to, go to the clubhouse or visit a friend or a family that's within the community at will. Just call it up via the app, and it can deliver them to those locations. And some of these older folks, they like the independence without having to deal with a driver or someone that they have to interact with. They can just get in, do their thing with some of their friends, and kind of have this nice little community within the pod that transports them in comfort. Australia is hot, especially this time of year. I think it's summer there. So this gives a lot of freedom to this specific group of retirees. That leads me to our next offering that we have, which is a shuttle, and this one's larger. But we just did the first ever deployment at a major sporting event. We transported golfers and caddies around the event for their tee times and when they had to be at different media events. And so we made well over 100 journeys during the course of this time. And the great thing about it is given the fact that we're in COVID, we're able to design and make things fit specific use cases. And unexpected as COVID was, we were able to manage that and create a situation where caddies and the golfers could be transported safely at the distances that are recommended for this pandemic. And so the great thing also about this shuttle is it's not just an autonomous shuttle. It is drivable like you would with a regular shuttle or bus. So the great thing is that really opens up the deployment options and opportunities. So if you want to run it autonomously, sometimes you can do that. Or if you want to do move it around to a different location, you just drive it. So that's the only vehicle on the planet that serves both purposes, and we're really proud of that. So this one will change the way people move around airports in areas like that autonomously or with as just an EV. So that's been exceptional for us. The next thing that we offer and that we've been working towards is what they call a ULD or a Dolly carrier. And the big A380 in the background, they have these big containers, as you can see in the photo on the left, and they move these off, and they're usually tugged around the airport by looks like a small train. Well, what we've developed is a system that allows us to have each individual ULD or luggage or cargo be moved around the airport at its discretion, so that it can kind of work in this dance of where it needs to be without having to be brought all at once by one vehicle. Great thing about that is you don't need the tug, which is most of them are diesel. The amount of space you need to store these things, and airport property is extremely limited at most airports. And you also are able to move these things on 90-degree angles, transport them in any directions, and you can reduce the amount of operating space you need. So these are some of the ways that the first and last mile technology that we have will be able to change things moving forward. And I think the great thing about it is we've made so many advances in just the last couple of years. I mean, we're at that point where you can deploy and operate, and the technology on our end is accelerating so fast that it's really exciting, and we've been able to see the looks on people's faces when they're able to take their first ride in a vehicle, without having to worry about the traditional sense of, it's got to wait till 1 o'clock before we can go, or I don't want to talk to anyone, or all these things. It's been a real pleasure, and everyone's excited about the opportunity to experience this. So I think I left you a little time.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris. And what I find exciting about what you guys are doing there at Aurrigo is the fact that your platform, your solution, moves passengers and people, and that's really wonderful. So
yeah, it's the great thing too is with this thing is because we do the operating system and the shuttles and the hardware, it's kind of almost like the Apple ecosystem where everything always just seems to work. And so that's kind of been it's really helped us achieve a lot of things.
Great. Thank you again, Chris. Wonderful. And Cindy, over to you, and a very different subject, CAV and FinTech. Over to you.
I will try and share my screen, make sure this works okay. I can be heard, I assume?
Loud and clear there, Cindy, yes.
Okay, and you can see my slides. Great.
You and your slides.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cindy Zhang. I am a financial services lawyer at BLG, as Barry mentioned. I was asked, so my practice ranges from banking to fintechs and payments, anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, and as well consumer protection. So I do everything financial services that I can get my hands on and my brain wrapped around. So I was asked today to talk about the prospect of when CAVs and banking services come together. And I've actually never had the privilege and the pleasure to think about CAVs. So thank you for this opportunity, Barry. It's been really interesting to hear so far Armin and Chris's insights and take a peek into this world. So today, very quickly, I will go through the financial services regulatory landscape in Canada, and then I will focus on payments specifically, and then this prospect of bringing those payments and CAVs together. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail. It is just an outline of a survey of the financial services regulators that are in place in Canada, and it's to sort of demonstrate or show to you the breadth of authorities required to maintain the integrity of our financial ecosystem. I will note that there will be there will be a new sheriff in town. It will be called the new Retail Payments Oversight Framework, which will be regulated by the Bank of Canada, and it's going to bring into scope of regulation non-traditional payment service providers. And so in turn, it will likely bring into scope, the same scope, any suppliers that want to bring these services through CAVs, which would be salient for today's discussion. In payments, I enjoyed preparing the slide because I forgot what made me interested in payments in the first place. It is the fundamental basis of all the business we do together. The current, today's modern payments rules rest on hundreds of years of progression and foundations in this idea of exchanging things or chattel for services and goods and products. So this, in 1882, it was the first time that the Bills of Exchange was codified in the UK. In 1985, Canada, we got our own Bills of Exchange Act. And the last time it was amended, as I understand it, was in 2007, which allowed check imaging. So we could use our phones to deposit checks directly into our deposit accounts at the banks we hold. So introducing this prospect of making payments and banking in CAVs will impact people's lives in many ways that I can't really even imagine. So in my world in payments, I see every day or every week digital innovation happen rapidly. Our clients bring us new ideas and to frame loans and to frame financial services and make payments, affect payments, new funds flows, cross-border, new speeds. So this CAVs, what they can do, and what I think imagine, the existence of pre-authorized payments, this impact together will make a difference in how we make everyday purchases, and routine purchase decisions I expect would be could be exported from our personal to-do lists, just being one example of what I can think of. So with CAVs coming together and payments, there are two kickoff questions that I thought about. The first one is, how does the consumer access the CAV? Is it a personal car, a car share, a robo-taxi? The second question is, of course, how is the consumer affecting the payment through this CAV? I've outlined a few examples like debit, credit, and digital wallets like Apple Pay. But I also highlighted whether insurance is covered or not, because I'm aware of a current class action that has been initiated from BC against a car share company. And the discussion in the question is it's alleging that the car share company has double charged for insurance for folks who drive the cars or rent the cars or lease it out, however you want to characterize it, and using a premium credit card that already has insurance coverage. Where am I? Okay, so very quickly, the overarching considerations, of course, is to understand what the regulatory regime is, or just to be aware of it for suppliers who are considering offering payment services through CAVs. There's also fraud, risk, data breaches, and privacy that I will just touch on very quickly today. The broadest consideration for making payments generally, is that today, in the incumbent system, financial institutions and banks are considered the custodians of two very important assets. That's the cash, the money that customers deposit with them, and also the customer's banking information. And there are, of course, many granular rules around payment service providers and financial institutions of what to do with this data, how long to store it, where to store it, how to destroy it, and what you can do or sell or not with it. But more interestingly, I think for me, and more forward-looking, is when I was preparing for this presentation, I read the CAVCO article in March, and it was in the discussion about Canadian readiness for CAVs. And Canada was ranked the second highest behind the UK for creating an open data environment. And this is exciting for me because I have been a part of and witness to a pretty passionate initiative in Canada among industry stakeholders, fintechs, and the government to bring open banking to Canada. Recently, Bill C-11 was, 2 weeks ago, introduced a modernized legislation for privacy. So if open data does become norm and there is an infrastructure supporting it, I foresee that payments and CAVs and these services would be enabled and facilitated to move forward. So I wouldn't be a useful lawyer if I don't present solutions to the problems and the risks that I've identified. So I turn to our Ross McGowan, who's a seasoned fraud litigator in banking and white collar crime partner here, who's just down the hall from me, and I asked him, what suppliers or folks that are contemplating supplying these services should think about. And he talks about a disaster response team. It's good to have one in place. And these are some of the things you can expect. Also, we always have a bunch of checklists and practice guides for our clients who, as soon as they find out they have some sort of perhaps a breach, they would call us and we walk them through it. And he likes to remind me that there is one attack per day per person in the Western world in terms of privacy fraud. And I think that brings me to my last slide. So this is just a teaser and a shameless plug that BLG has an article coming out hopefully next week, where Stephen Redican, who is our payments expert, and myself sit down with Barry Kirk and we talk and we muse and we discuss the concepts of payments and CAVs coming together and the possibilities that could bring to the everyday consumer and how that will impact our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. If I put my futurist hat on, one of the questions in my mind is whether a CAV in the future will ever have its own bank account as an individual rather than a human bank account, and that's another topic for the future.
Yes, and we would have to determine what a human is, or a legal person.
Yes. Thank you, Cindy. That was 3 of you. It's now time to ask the panel some questions. And as I said earlier, please use the box on your screen, the one with a question mark on it, to pose your questions. And we have about 13 or so minutes left on the clock for this part of the webinar. And we do have one question I can see there from Chelsea, and she posed a question for all panelists, and something that some of you have touched on. What do you consider to be the biggest privacy and data protection considerations of CAVs for employees, drivers, occupants, pedestrians? What's the biggest consideration there? Cindy, you touched on this in what you're talking about. Do you want to lead off the conversation and maybe the others can jump in?
I think there are a lot of jumping back on open data, the privacy is at the forefront of that. Without good privacy, without a good public infrastructure and security infrastructure, there cannot be the system. Otherwise, we won't have consumer buy-in, customer buy-in, and suppliers are at risk of endless liability. And insurance providers will be, hesitant to protect that. I do know that, I've been a part of the consultations that the Department of Finance has been launching and undergoing now, and there is a lot of talk about what should be the standard and should be set by industry security standard. And that is still in the works, so that's a great question. I am not a tech person, but I do know that those experts are working around and trying and figuring that out. We can look to other countries like the UK that have open data and see what their systems are. And I think the digital charter will account for that too.
Yeah. Thanks, Cindy. Chris or Amin, do you have any thoughts in terms of privacy and the key considerations?
These are actually taking into account the information that we as people generate, but that the companies own. I think we're entering a whole new period of what open data looks like and what governments can ask for as a right of doing business in your jurisdiction, to be able to have anonymized data. The example I would use, which is very old, from the 1990s, all of the banks must produce anonymized data on mortgage issuances, defaults, credit card issuances, and for delayed payments. And you can, anybody can look at that information online. And that is proprietary information that is anonymized, that is pooled together. There's no reason why we aren't asking all of our platform providers to do similar things, but we're not. And so the issue of privacy and utilization of the data have to go hand in hand.
Yeah. Good, thank you. Chris, I'll skip you over you on this one. You're number one on the next question here.
Number one on the next question, okay.
There's a very good question here from Jacob, and he has asked, once one such as China deploys CAVs on public roads, will most others follow quickly, and will there be a domino effect? Chris, over to you.
Yeah, I think would China, if China implements something or people get things on the road there, I think a lot of it depends on each specific region, country, and what the rules are. Obviously, say for instance, the United States, each state and municipality has their own rules and how they set things. So it will start to happen. There'll be a roadmap for it if that's, if they release and make that type of thing public, then there'll be a map to follow in a sense. If they say, okay, maybe we want to do this, maybe we don't. But I don't think it's going to be just as clear cut and dried as like, well, they're doing it in China. I think there will be a lot of mulling over which state or which country, how they want to handle it, because also it depends on what you're running, what kind of vehicles, so each one might fall under, a different category as opposed to maybe what they're doing. because they have control and it comes from the top down, and then whenever that's decided, then it's just what it is. It's a little more complicated in other countries and states and things. So I think that it will push things forward because people will see it. They'll see it on social media and news and such things like that. But I think it'll be more of a flash in the pan, and then people will still go about their business of determining what best suits their area. Because, you know, I think they all stand alone to a certain degree. If you get the National Highway Transportation Safety to cover a certain level of them, and then they just kind of cast out a net. But California has very different rules as to what you can drive and how you can do it. And I've experienced that myself with old muscle cars or vehicles. It doesn't qualify for the road because it wasn't before a certain year. What tech does it have on it? There's so many factors. And so to just blanket an answer, I'm not sure I can give that to you on that one, Jacob.
No, thank you, Chris. Cindy or Armin, do you want to jump in on that one? No. No?
I think Chris covered it.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to jump in also, saying that China has been really clear that it wants to dominate global markets in fintech in particular and platforms. So to the extent that Uber pulled out because China was going forward, I would imagine that there is something where China is the market maker when it comes to robo-taxis. I don't know about anything else. Maybe autonomous vehicles, but as I said, I think autonomous vehicles that are personally owned are going to be more this complementarity than autonomy, where the machine is driving the person. Rather, the person will still be in charge of the vehicle that they have. The machinery will just be made easier. But I think we're talking about something completely different when we talk about robo-taxis and mass fleets to move people around. I agree completely with Chris that it's top down in China, and they will do what is best as they see it for the regulation of public space, but then they can regulate public space in a way we can't because of our more libertarian streak.
To make another point to it, in a sense of where we're going, it's almost kind of like how the pandemic has been going around the world and how they're treated. It's like they got to control. They have a much better grip on it because, like I said, the top down, they make the decision and it's final. The places with a little more freedom, it's going to be nuanced and move, you know, kind of almost like an amoeba. What's happening? So I think that's something you can look to as how it might actually happen, just based on our current experience.
Can I
just add one?
Sure, go ahead, Cindy.
Just as the Chinese person on the panel, and I'm connected to China. My relatives are all there, and I use some of their platforms, and we support companies that have reach there, and one of the market benefit they do have, companies that start out there, is that they have so many people that will, and they're very fast picking up, technological innovations, and particularly because there are just so many, and there are a lot of younger people as well. And so once they come out and reach out of China, once they've developed out of there, they have a lot of market strength as well.
No, it sounds good. I should just jump in there. A few months ago in The Economist magazine, there's a very good article about electric vehicles, which is a close cousin to CAVs. And it's very, very clear from that article that China wants to dominate the global market for electric vehicles. And that's exactly the same sort of point you folks were making in terms of CAVs. So, yeah, they have big ambitions that will drive things around the world. Got an interesting question here. We've got a few minutes left, and I'll close out from Dave, who says that the flying cars that Armin showed look rather like a helicopter. And is there at this point in time any official terminology to differentiate between a flying car and a plane? Any thoughts there, Armin?
So really interesting question, Dave. Thank you. I think it depends on the degree of autonomy. So that's the point that I made, that these vehicles don't require a licensed pilot. So does that make them a helicopter or a plane? I think we're just entering into uncharted territory here about the definition. As was said earlier by Cindy, it's almost like having to define what a human is in this weird mix of who's in charge of this thing. Is it the machine or is it the person? So I think we're heading into new territory about and that's the reason why the regulatory mechanisms are going to be caught flat-footed. Rich people will be able to find a place to land these things. They are designed for one person at a time, at best two-seaters. The Shorefly that I showed you, which does look like a helicopter, is very, very small. And it costs a lot of money, $200 per crack. So you've got to be pretty rich to even think about it. The biggest buyer right now in the market is the US military. So it has limited application that for some people, but it is actually a really big deal from a regulatory point of view if you're going to mass market it. And it will never be a mass market. It'll be a big bespoke market because there's so many people with so much money now. But it will never be a mass thing. And that's why I raised the issue about the study in Berlin. There's another one that was done in a scientific journal, and both of them are referenced in the footnotes in my slides. Another one that was done that just basically say the people that want them live in dense urban areas. There's just not enough landing places for them. And there's not enough airspace. Like you're going to need air corridors and all sorts of rules that these things are designed to avoid rules. The whole tech libertarian bro brother, the tech bro thing that's going on is all about don't get in my way, get out of my way. So we really have some regulatory challenges ahead of us, in my humble estimation.
Nope. Thank you, Armin. A final question here. Frank, I think a good one. We've got about 2 minutes left, so fairly quick answers, please. From Frank, will CAV be a net positive or negative to the climate crisis? Who wants to take that first? Chris, Cindy?
Probably Chris on your products.
Yeah. I would say yes. Overall, it will be a net positive because of just electric reduction in traffic, optimization of traffic flow, eliminating the amount of carbon that goes into the atmosphere when there's traffic jams, and with all this smart technology and smart infrastructure with these vehicles combined, that should eliminate that. So reducing millions of tons of that stuff going in the atmosphere through all those mechanisms, I think, yes, it will.
I would like to jump in and say we don't know, because we don't know how much of the CAV movement is going to end up being bespoke and how much it will be mass. So to the extent that it does replace masses of people moving, yes, it could be exactly as Chris said, but it's unclear to me that that's how it will be adopted. We'll see.
Well, let me close the panel here. So Chris and Cindy and Armin, thank you very much indeed for your presentations, for the Q&A. It's been fascinating. Really enjoyed it. And now I want to introduce Manjula Selvarajah. Manjula is a journalist, a host and technology columnist with segments aired on CBC Radio's 20 or so radio stations across the country. So, Manjula, over to you, please, for your panel.
Hi, Barry. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. And you?
Great. That was a fantastic panel. Fantastic panel. And I can't wait to get into this next discussion, because we're going to look at the future and explore how CAVs will transform our lives. What does the evolution of CAVs mean for how we'll live, work, and play in the decades to come? How will it change our thoughts about a broad range of topics that we debate now, from infrastructure to ownership? And what will the cities of the future look like? Barry, do I have your commitment that you're going to stick around and listen in?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, with interest.
All right, great. I have a panel on hand to help us think through these ideas. Michael Tremblay is the president and CEO of Invest Ottawa, Bayview Yards, and Area X.O. And Natalie Guthrie is the director of human resources at CENGEN, which is the Center of Excellence in Next Generation Networks. Dr. Burak Kantarsi is Associate Professor at the University of Ottawa's Smart Connected Autonomous Vehicles Innovation Lab. And Catherine Carlton is a council member and the former mayor of the city of Menlo Park. Good morning, all.
Hi.
Morning.
Good morning.
Such a pleasure to have you all here. And I will maybe start you off on a difficult question. Why not? Just to wake everyone up. We know that these technologies are going to lead to a drastic reimagination of the communities that we live in. Michael, I'll start with you. Paint us a picture of what these neighborhoods, communities, and cities will look like 2 to 3 decades from now.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I wasn't anticipating. Oh, do we have a bit of ringing on the line? Hopefully that's okay now. So when I'm more of a crunchy R&D analytical kind of guy, and so what we do at ARIX.O is a lot of the current testing. But when I look at this through the numbers, a lot of the projections get into giving you a sobering view of how long this is going to take. I think Armin did a good job in the last panel of giving a pretty good overview of what to anticipate. But if you look at numbers that come out of organizations like the World Economic Forum, you're not going to see really, heavy usage of really fully autonomous vehicles until probably 2030, and that will be largely at a fleet level. I don't believe that we're going to see, heavy production that would compete with traditional vehicles, whether they're electric or combustion, until 2045. But I think the tipping point for actually seeing the movement from traditional to vehicles that would fall into a category where they would be connected is 2045. That's a long way away. Currently, the shipments are about 58 million a year that are happening, and these are for basic connectivity. Getting into level 4, level 5 vehicles. Level 5 is really not going to happen for a very long time at mass. I think very wealthy people will be able to get benefits of some of these advanced features much early on, but it's going to be a very long time.
Interesting. It actually comes back to what Armin was just saying on the last panel about we're going to see the bespoke before we she thinks at least before we see sort of a mass rollout. Natalie, I would like to have you weigh in on this.
I think that something that Michael said is really interesting about the timelines. When we're looking at the timelines of when we would see an actual effect to us, to the general population, and we think about what our vision is of autonomous and connected vehicles and how much it will affect us. I think one thing that we have to remember is what our role is right now. Our role is not going to be the release in the 20, 30, 40 years. Our role now is to really set the groundwork, is to get the buy-in, is to get people to understand what is coming, but to have them have realistic expectations of the timelines. I mean, we do this to ourselves where we expect that, we thought we'd have flying cars by now in 2020, which is absolutely not the case. Because we grew up watching the Jetsons. So we thought, well, maybe this will be our future. But to have that realistic timeline and to have that education behind the timeline to understand really what our role is right now.
Thank you. And, I have to say, the moment you mention flying cars, it kind of just takes over the conversation because it sounds, you can't help it. It sounds exciting. Dr. Kantarsi?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are actually different views. I agree, actually, with Mike that we won't have fully autonomous vehicles in the very near future. But when I check the forecasts, well, they have actually different opinion for the future, but almost everyone agrees that in the next 5 years, almost 50% of the vehicles will have some level of automation. But I'm not talking about L3 through L5, but lower level automation, which most of us have in our vehicles today. Now, the estimations, they vary from 20% of all miles driven in 2040 by fully autonomous vehicles to 70% of all miles, which is very ambitious, in 2035. Well, these are very optimistic estimations, I would say. We still need to actually care for standardization and also legal and policy aspects. But what we can also say about the future of autonomous vehicles is, I believe we can certainly expect that 20 years from now, no matter what, the roads are going to be safer than today. Because majority of the accidents that we have now, by majority, I mean vast majority, like more than 90%, they are caused by human error. So we'll be able to prevent them, that's certain. But as I said, we need to care for also other aspects besides technology.
Catherine, it's so good to have you join us from sunny California. Would you like to weigh in on that?
Sure. When we talk about autonomous vehicles, a lot of times we're talking about individuals. And individuals en masse do tend to take things up more slowly than expected, especially when you have people who really like driving cars. You have my generation who, I still like standard cars. I'm terrible. I had to give one up finally because I bought a Tesla. But beyond all the issues that we have to deal with the cities in liability, I live in America. We sue each other. Issues, there are liability issues. There are all these other very legitimate reasons. You also have to deal with the emotional attachment to people just liking cars, and you also have to deal with just fear of something new. My Tesla is capable of driving itself. I don't use that very often. The only time I use it is when maybe I've flown in from Europe and I know I'm tired. And I figure that is a safety issue as well, because I'm not 100% sure how safe it is. No offense to Tesla. It probably is, but we all need to get over that emotional boundary beyond all the legal and infrastructure and everything else. Where we do see it really picking up, though, is in private mobility services, things like Uber and Lyft, and having something deliver your pizza. We have something now in Silicon Valley that's being tested. It's, how big is it? It's about 3 foot by 2 foot. It's a car little thing that will deliver your pizza, your cupcakes, whatever you want, automatically. So where do we draw the line? We talked about flying cars and helicopters. Where do we draw the line between AV, a smaller delivery thing, and something large enough to have people? So remember, we've got Zoox, Amazon bot. Amazon's not about retail anymore. It's about logistics and moving people as well as moving things. So we've got private mobility service, we've got good movement, we've got public transit, and how that gets. I can see public transit becoming an early adopter, not only in the large buses and things like that, but they're looking at things like in government, we deal so much with equity, and you have people that need to go to school and they live really far out, and the poor kids end up spending an hour on the bus. Wouldn't it be great if we had autonomous vehicles that could go pick up children in a more effective, efficient way that not only saves money, but also frees up time for the kids to be kids and not trapped in a bus? There's so many other ways and so many beautiful ways that it can impact our lives positively, beyond just the individual with the car in the driveway. And I know I've talked a lot, but before I stop, there's also a blur between what is private and public anyway, because it could be in the future, I go to work and then I let my car go off and be its own Uber for a while. So a lot of these things we have to think with an open mind, because those borders just aren't there anymore.
Well, it's interesting, coming back to that idea of the public, and you're right, because, the notion of driving a car is romanticized in so many ways, in movies and who teaches you how to drive. I remember at one point it was a struggle for me to find a journalist who would like an electric car, an auto journalist, because they loved gears, right? So it's interesting to talk about what the public wants. And Dr. Gandarsi, I'll put that to you. Do you think the public wants this? Like, give me a sense of what the public appetite for CAVs are in our lives?
That's actually a very good question. Thank you very much, Manjula, because, people get excited when they hear about the autonomous vehicles and self-driving cars, and the time, that's they will have more free time actually when they have AV rides. But there are also concerns. So would you take an AV ride? When you ask this question to the public, not the majority of the public is completely ready for that, because there are some concerns regarding liability or safety of the ride due to potential cyber or cyber physical attacks, and also social consequences as well for the AVs, which were also covered in the previous panel. So we need here, I guess, some exploratory research in order to better align the self-driving and regulatory frameworks to enable the efficient deployments of these autonomous vehicles. And what the public needs, as far as we can see, because this is a part of ongoing research in our lab, besides the technical solutions and technology developments, we are also working on increasing the social acceptance and what can be done to increase the social acceptance of autonomous vehicles. And what we see is the public needs connected, dependable, and policy and legal aware autonomous vehicles that are equipped with decision support systems in order for them to accept the AV rights. And one of the things that the public, as far as I can see, is concerned now is the uncertainty about liability during an AV ride. For example, a potential breach in data usage, or the trade-off due to the volume of data that you provide or you're willing to provide versus the quality of service that you're receiving, or the safety of the ride versus the data that you're providing. And we are actually aiming to develop some new technologies and aiming to communicate them to the end users in order to increase the public acceptance. And earlier I mentioned the safety of the roads and safety of the rides as well. And I actually concluded my response previously saying that roads are going to be safer than what we have now today. And I'm comfortable to say that, but we need to show this in the ongoing R&D efforts. And why I'm comfortable to say that? Well, as I said, we know that, 90% of the accidents now are due to human error. And our drivers, they only experience a few accidents in their lifetime. And it's not possible for a single driver to learn from accidents. But if you have intelligent decision support systems, more specifically, let's say artificial intelligence-backed decision support systems, we should be able to ensure stability and reliability of the rides. And I can also give you some numbers here. Well, the reactions that we give as humans, these are actually chemically triggered reactions at the order of some seconds, a second to 1.5 seconds. But when we think about a computer that is equipped with, let's say, a gigahertz scale processor, if you have a well-trained model, you can get a response at the order of some millisecond latency. It is possible. And what we need to answer as researchers and developers, or all stakeholders in this area, is we need to answer actually two questions here. So that's why I said we need more exploratory research to be able to increase the public appetite and to be able to increase public acceptance of the AVs. The first question is that we need to find an answer. Can the cognitive technology analyze and interpret the data like a human? And the second question we need to answer is it possible to reach stable, intelligent decisions for distributed learners? By learners, I mean the autonomous vehicles that have non-ideal communication channels between them. So we also need to explore some ultra-reliable and low-latency communications, those capabilities with the AV ecosystem, as well as the freshness of the data that's being exchanged between the cars. So these two questions remain for us to tackle. And I believe as we find more solid answers to these questions as researchers and developers, not necessarily only engineers or computer scientists, but from all disciplines, I think we'll be able to increase public acceptance.
Natalie, Dr. Kantarsi just talked about some of the things that researchers have to do, some key questions. how do you think that the public appetite can be cultivated? And I would say, in a certain sense, how can the public be reassured about CAVs?
I think one of the biggest pieces is education. I think there's obviously a lack of understanding, and no one's really, nobody's fault. It's really just when you hear about autonomous vehicles, you think of just one thing or one facet of it. You think about maybe sitting in the car and saying, "Hey, car, get me to work in the fastest possible route," and that's it. That is the realm of your thinking, because that is what's beneficial to you. People don't really understand that there is far more to connected autonomous vehicles, and that just comes from education. And a lot of it, to really build public appetite, is to appeal to what's important to them. Dr. Kantarsi made a good point. Reduction of fatalities, reduction of road accidents. There's also harmful emissions reduction. So there's a lot of different things that it all depends on what is your appetite? What is it you're looking for? Are we looking in the field of agriculture, where connected and autonomous vehicles can assist there? Well, they're going to have a much different view as to what they need and what is the benefit to them, versus someone who's trying to find the fastest way to work, versus someone who has great interest or investment in green energy tools and is more interested in harmful emissions. So all these people, all these sources, all these groups can all benefit from the technology that's being put forward, but don't have that realization, because they are lacking the fact that they haven't been educated on what some of the benefits are. We're lacking the full understanding of all the different facets where this can really bring us to this, to drive that interest. And the other thing too is the realization that people are consuming some of the technology that is being implemented today for connected and autonomous vehicles without realizing it. Because you can't talk to your car yet and tell it where to go, you're thinking, oh, well, it's not here yet, it's in the future. No, this is actually part of our daily lives. It's just we're going to go a step further. But without seeing that step and seeing the immediate benefits and getting that instant gratification from driving my car to fully autonomous vehicle, it's hard to make that link. So really, it's a game of patience, it's a game of education, and it's really just speaking to what is beneficial to you. And let's teach you that piece. Let's give you that mountain of information where you can see where it's going to benefit you directly, or your interest directly, or your group or your social circle directly.
I love that point that you make about how, we don't know that we're already embracing some of these technologies because it's so incremental, right? That's fascinating. Now, Michael, you have something to share with us on a very real experience with testing technologies. Jessica, could we run that tape?
Everywhere I go, I
that was the recent project we ran at Tunney's Pasture here in Ottawa, which is a government complex, which is downtown. So it gave us a very safe, secure area that allowed for public testing. So we actually had 670 riders over a matter of about 10 days, very controlled and contained because of the pandemic. But this was the third project we ran with Transport Canada. I know we have a few Transport Canada folks on the call today, which is great. These kinds of projects are really important. And I think Dr. Kantarsi talked about this earlier. This is around the research and development, testing this with society, getting their feedback, incorporating that into the direction. And so we look to tease out these kinds of projects so that we can actually advance the research, the development, and the progression of these ideas, without which it's really hard to capture the imagination of the public unless they're immersed in it. So Area X.0 is kind of a unique spot for doing these things because we've created an environment that is intended to tackle some of the big problems. So I provided a few forecasts earlier on that who knows exactly what it'll be, but there are some technical issues with this whole area. Things like how broadly available are 5G networks. These vehicles throw out a lot of data, and it's interesting to run something that is like an HD mapped GPS driven vehicle around a park. It's very different to gather data, to use an edge server to consolidate and get the best information to send it off to headquarters over a network. Or imagine a fleet of these vehicles all trying to communicate with each other and also trying to communicate with pedestrians that have smart technology on them, or those that are riding cycles. There's a lot of things that will happen. You need fast networks. You need networks that are extremely efficient. You need big cloud services. So the list is long. And so the point of Area X.0 is to try to provide a variety of experiences to cover off a wide range of different use case scenarios. I think Natalie had mentioned precision agriculture. We have a 100-acre smart farm where we're doing precision agriculture testing. Not right now because it's awfully cold, but we did till the soil in time to get our second season up and running as that happens next year. And so these are all learnings and developments that will allow us to really advance this whole mission in a very practical, meaningful way. So I do want to thank the Transport Canada team. Our third project, we are doing a mini documentary of the experience. It was an 8-week project. Started off with orienting a broad group of us around the actual technology, doing private testing later at the Area X.0 facility, which is a gated area. It's a government facility that is gated and quite private and safe. Then we proved out and did a stage gate to be able to actually run the Tunney's Pasture test with the public. We were able to bring a few SMEs along with us. So we had Auto Guardian providing some technology that helps keep pedestrians safe as vehicles are approaching, and a group called Ride Shark that provides an app that allows for bubble riding. So in the pandemic, who knew that would be a thing? But it was a very useful piece of technology to make it all happen.
And the Canada Geese allowed you to do this, no troubles?
Well, there's kind of a good point, right? So who knew that Canada Geese would be a problem from an R&D point of view? So there was a few things that kind of jumped out to me as we were doing the testing around the Tunney's Pasture area. We went from a day that was -6 or 7 degrees, that's Celsius for Catherine, and the next day was like 12 degrees. And the vehicles behave differently at different temperatures. If you think about just battery technology, how it performs in sub-zero weather versus during a normal day that you'd walk around with a jacket on, it's a very different way in which it operates. And so we did a lot of research and testing around how the HVAC system would work on board, how the communication systems were performing. It's a lot of research we did. And so that means when we do our fourth test, which we hope to do at Transport again, we'll be able to advance that idea that much further. So Canada Geese, yeah, it's a thing. It's a problem.
So Catherine, there you go. I mean, Canadians are generally quite nice, but not Canada Geese. It's something for you to remember. I mean, California, I know, Catherine, is pretty progressive when it comes to this particular sector. But I wonder, as a former mayor, as a city councilor, give us some sense of, how do you plan for something when you don't know? Like, how do you plan the infrastructure and urban planning and all of those things when you don't know what these technologies and these solutions are going to look like?
Well, I think sometimes people forget that the mayors, city council members usually don't have a tech background. Usually they're lawyers and such. And so they depend on research and staff and people like you in getting together and communicating with them. Sometimes the research is interesting. I was just looking at a report done by the MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation, with Arup. And they were saying, well, how is this going to affect greenhouse gases? And they said, well, it could make it 50% worse or 45% better. Useful statistics. So, you have to get out there and think about the secondary, tertiary, what are the knock-on effects? Taking the long view, because to be honest with you, I don't even think the people developing the cars really know. And so I think it's really important that we physically attend as soon as we can events like this. We watch events like this and we educate ourselves. And I think it's important as well that the tech people developing this, as much as they can, work together with the government people so that they understand the constraints that we're under, and the government people really work to understand what's coming down the road in the tech so that we can work together. Because my grandmother used to say, snails whizzing by make us dizzy. We're government, we move pretty slowly. And that's a good thing, because, the decisions we make don't only affect people's lives and quality of life, it can be life or death. And we have to make sure that, in a democracy anyway, that we get the feedback from the residents, and that we make sure that we have complete streets, that we're respecting the bicyclists and the different people. And I spent 11 years living in China, and let me tell you, it's a lot easier there, where you don't have to really consider the residents' feedback quite as much as we do. But even things like, as we move forward with AVs and even EVs, chargers. One of the things we're struggling with is, how do we rezone? How do we force people, when they're building a new apartment building, to put in more chargers? How do we plan? The governor in California has said in 2035, they're no longer going to sell gas cars in California. So we have to run with infrastructure plans now to figure out exactly how we're going to support this. And in many cases, being government, we have to lead with a stick as much as a carrot sometimes, to make sure that these things are installed. And beyond that, we have to look at parking. I read recently, I forget where it was, about 45% of traffic in major cities are taxis and people circling around looking for parking spaces. So, and in India, this is a problem too. There are no parking spaces, so people just have their drivers drive around town until they call them with the phone to pick them up. It's a real problem. So now that we have autonomous cars, we don't need them circling around. We still need parking spaces, but the parking spaces can be further out on the edge of town, so they can drop us off. They can go to the edge of the area, park, and we can open up some of the parking spaces to have paseos and more housing, whatever is needed in that area, in that city. So it's going to open up opportunities as well. Now, again, they're good and bad in this. I've seen some, I think it was Zook, had a really cool car that literally you could set up the car to be your office. So if you're a salesperson, you never have to go in the office. You could literally just work in your car as you go from place to place. And there's some people believing that people will live further out, and we might have more urban sprawl as you can live further out, and that hour drive in isn't wasted, because that's an hour in your workday. So we look at VMT, vehicle miles traveled, in this as well, and we look at how are we going to deal with the zoning infrastructure to support these changes as they come forward. And we also worry about things like cybersecurity. Imagine if somebody hacked one group of cars, they could kidnap people, crash them. Horrible things could happen on that level beyond just the basic safety of the technology. It takes the systems that we have and that security to a whole new level. And even things like traffic lights, I can totally geek out on traffic lights. They really take days out of our lives sitting at traffic lights. And Edmonton actually and Canada is doing a really good job of experimenting with smart traffic lights. And they're able to speak to each other, and they're able to use cameras to see, oh, we've got this many bicycles coming through, pedestrians, this many cars, and it can feed it back real time rather than having to collect the data, having an engineer look through it and all this, and then it can adjust itself so that when the traffic's heavier or lighter, it can push traffic through, it can reroute traffic, it can know if there's an accident in that intersection and be able to help people go through. And that's going to be obviously 100 times better with AVs, but at least I think in the next 2 generations, it's not going to be all AVs. There's still going to be people driving the 67 Mustang that they love, right next to the guy with the AV, right next to the guy with the Tesla.
For sure, yeah.
It's all levels of comfort, and it's all going to be hybrid, and it will eventually. It's not a matter of if. It is eventually people will stop driving, but not in the next 2 generations that I can see.
Yeah, and you have a point. Like, people have these cars that they embrace, right? And it's actually ties into a question that we have that's come in as well. Sorry, I'll let you finish, Catherine.
No, it's fine. I'm just saying that even down to all kinds of levels of granularity, running a city, you have to think of these things, and you have to figure out how to plan so far in advance to do it once, to dig once, to be able to implement these things. And the pressure's on to do it right, because you're using taxpayer dollars and you're impacting people's lives. So I really encourage not only people within the government, but people in tech to work together as closely as you can to understand your needs and be able to not have to redo things or run backwards.
Yeah, and I like that idea of the partnership. And by the way, I should mention that we are open to taking questions from the audience. You just have to add it to the chat window and let me know who you want it directed to. Further to your point, Catherine, about the fact that we have these sort of 2 communities of people that want to hold on to their Mustangs, and then other people who want to jump on new technologies. There's a question from John about. Michael, I think I'll get you to start off on this. Do we need more transportation innovation zones across Canada to help the public understand the benefits? This would also provide valuable information to researchers to improve the technology. He says we are planning to develop a zone in Windsor for testing and would love feedback from your panel on the best way to get started.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different types. I would start by saying, when we set out with what was originally Ottawa L5, and then we broadened it to Area X.0, given that there's a wide variety of testing that you could do in the mobility space. Car testing is one thing, and it doesn't necessarily require the R&D. It's more around the testing. So you can actually run scenarios, and many cities across Canada are actually developing regions where they can actually do this kind of on-road testing. And so that's one thing. What we've been focused on, because of Ottawa's history of being a very strong telecommunications and tech region, is the R&D around the advancement of what can happen. So we don't actually have a test track per se, which is the kind of thing that you would have in, say, Blainville, Quebec, where you, with transport, would actually run the same tests across 50 different kinds of vehicles, and it's very repetitive, and it's there for certifications. That actually isn't what we're doing. What we're focused on is trying to open up the innovation side of this equation. There's lots of questions that are popping up around batteries. We've got a couple of different types of chargers. We've got a company that we work with locally called G Batteries. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make the experience of filling up your electric gas tank, if you will, at the same pace that you would with your combustion vehicle with gas, so that it's not a 45-minute experience. It's like a few minutes, and that you're not damaging the battery as you're charging it that quickly. So we try to foster that kind of innovation, because if you're going to open up markets, and if you're going to get into a mass transit approach to take to take society with you, you have to think about all of these different situations. So the simple answer is yes, there's lots of these popping up. There's lots of support out there for helping to make these testing environments possible. In Ontario, we've got the AVEN network. There's 6 different locations. We're one of them. Our focus is on the R&D around mobility. That's what we do.
Dr. Kentarsi, would you like to weigh in on that?
I think I would like to echo what Mike has just said, because he's covered all of the points. And I do agree that having these innovation zones across the country will really help the public understand the benefits of the technology. And also, this will also ease things for us to increase the public acceptance and the public appetite for the technology. Yeah.
So then let me start you thinking about this, because we're kind of nearing the last sort of 5 minutes of our talk here. I'd love each of you to very quickly go over what the benefits to society would be, because we've talked about, well, we need to tell the public, educate the public about what this is. That is an important part of it, right? I'd like you to very quickly, this might be hard to do, walk us through some specific examples of the benefits that we can get from the evolution and the appearance of these technologies. Natalie, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, I can stay in my wheelhouse and take the easy road to this one, which is to look at job creation. Getting people engaged is probably difficult in some stage, but once you really trigger what's in it for them and why it's exciting for them, then you look at the job creation part of where we are able to transpose the worry about, well, if you have all these autonomous vehicles, you have to fire all your bus drivers, and you kind of switch that perspective to here's where you can engage people and realign and get them into roles that fit into this area. So there's a great opportunity here for job education, job creation, re-education. There's a great opportunity for academic involvement, partnering with many of the academic post-secondary institutions in Canada. We are seeing more of an appetite from the technology coming from those who are really going to be using, contributing, and consuming it, which is the young talent. So there's really a great benefit when you talk about job creation, growth, innovation. That's the benefit that I see that is probably the easiest sell.
Thank you, Natalie. I'll give everyone else about 30 seconds to, I know that's tough to put benefits in there because I think to a certain extent you sound like you're all advocates of the technology. Catherine?
Just unmuting myself, sorry. I actually would say that in every aspect, there are benefits and there are drawbacks. Jonathan Reichenthal, who just wrote a really good book on smart cities, was talking in his research about how he feels that it's not going to take away jobs, that even in the lower skilled jobs, it's going to create more interesting jobs, more rewarding jobs. But that's going to take time. That's not going to help the immediate taxi driver who loses his job. And as a city person, we have to think of how do we help people reschool, retool. It's going to help with diversity. It's going to help with equity in many ways, as I talked about before, and in other ways it's not. In terms of costs, it's going to help people in terms of less amount of cost for public transit, might make transit less, but the cost of the vehicles might be more. Everything has a give and take. And I don't think it's a clean, clear winner loser. I think that's the gray is why we're all here today, is to try and identify those and make it happen.
Yeah, you're right. We are talking about the grays. Dr. Kentarsi, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I won't repeat what has already been said about the job market. And besides public or personal transportation with the AVs, there's going to be other societal benefits, like AVs will be, I believe, and I can see that more widely adopted in the delivery of supplies or food. I'm not saying that it will happen. It will be more widely adopted because it is a reality now. And they're going to also play a key role in public health, which we haven't covered, I guess, because we are going through an unexpected pandemic era now. And there are examples in Jacksonville, Florida, for example. There are autonomous shuttles taking the COVID-19 tests and carrying them to a nearby Mayo Clinic processing location. So there's going to be other use cases like this. And another benefit to our cities are going to be the road traffic administration, because we're going to have 100% accurate information. Of course, we need to analyze the data and come up with those accurate decisions or recommendations. But we will have 100% accurate information from the autonomous and connected vehicles. And I know that our facts and figures, they show that road and traffic services are among the top largest items in our city budget. So we're going to be able to also lower them down.
Thank you. And Michael, you get the last word. I'm going to change up the question on you because I think this is a very key question. So as fast as you can get the answer after this, who should be leading the public education about CAVs? This is from Stephanie. Is it manufacturers, testing entities, regulators, other people, or is it a joint responsibility?
Yeah, so great question. I think I believe deeply in the triple helix model, and so let me explain that a little bit. When I look at all the projects that we've done, it includes big and small industry, it includes government regulators and policymakers, and it includes academia, the applied research that comes out of it. I think by doing those projects together, if you look at the Tunney's Pasture project, we have the media involved with us every step of the way to put a spotlight on what we were trying to achieve, to capture their imagination while we were doing the specialized work that we needed to do to advance the cause. So I'm a huge believer in that. I believe that that is a model that has actually catalyzed our work at Area X.0, and it's the exact approach we will be taking going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. Thank you all. I'm going to invite Barry Kirk back up on stage to take over from us. Hi, Barry.
Hi there, Angela. Before you disappear, I just want to say that was a really excellent panel session with you and your panelists. And the reason I know it's excellent, I was just itching all the way through to jump into the conversation, but it was very, very interesting. So thank you and congratulations to you, Angela, and to all of your panelists.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you and goodbye to the panelists there. And also I want to just repeat a thank you to the panelists in the previous session as well. And a very special thank you to you, our audience who've been tuned in all this time and joined us. And I also want to send special thanks to my friends and colleagues on the organizing team. Sonia, Jamie, Jess, Pat, and Adam, and to Frank and the team at Venue, which is the webinar platform we've been using. Without all of you, this webinar would not have been possible. Now we're going to have some fun. In 1 minute from now, we're going to begin the networking portion of our event. So please ensure that you click on the button at the bottom of your screen when we move into the next room. You will be asked for access to your camera and your microphone. Each connection will last 3 minutes, and then you'll be connected with somebody new. And we hope you really enjoy that. Thank you again. And this webinar and the others in the last 2 weeks have been recorded. And next week, if you go to that link there, cavcanada.ca, you'll be able to visit and get access to the recordings from all 3 webinars. And finally, from all of us at CAV Canada, I want to wish you all the very best wishes for a happy, wonderful, and above all, healthy holidays. And we wish you all much success in the new year. And our hopes and our prayers are that 2021 will be a big improvement over 2020. And I'm glad that Santa's got a driverless sleigh. So thank you all. Goodbye to you all and enjoy the networking.